Welcome to Fool's Key Tarot. I'm Ben, and this is a daily reading for Thursday, May 29th, 2025. Now we're doing something a little bit differently today. I've shuffled the deck with reversals, so we'll see if we get any of those. First, the Emperor upright. This is Major Arcana number 4. Could indicate regulations, rules, boundaries. Next, we have the Four of Cups reversed. So the Four of Cups has to do with waiting and withdrawing and questioning your assumptions. Finally, the Six of Cups upright. This has to do with childhood, nostalgia, looking at things through rose-colored glasses, also just having a nice time. I always think of candy or sweetness as the kind of aesthetic of this card. And of course, children enjoy candy, but so do adults. So it doesn't have to be a card relating to childhood, but it often is. So with the Four of Cups in reversed, that makes me think that there is something that you are diving into headfirst rather than withdrawing from. And with the Six of Cups over here, I imagine that is something to do with nostalgia or your childhood or maybe an old friend who you've known for a long time. And maybe you are thinking about moving away from them, not like physically moving necessarily, although it could mean that. Maybe this is somebody who you're mainly friends with because of your history together. And really, if you met today, you wouldn't become friends. And that doesn't mean that you should cut off the friendship. Sometimes the history is enough to propel a friendship forward, but sometimes a relationship, and this could be more than just a friendship, it could be a family member or even a romantic partner, but I'm seeing more of the generalized relationship here. And sometimes we stay in them out of convenience or just because they've existed for a long time. And we may not have even thought about leaving it behind because it's habitual or automatic. It seems unquestionable or unassailable that, of course, we are going to be tightly connected to this person. Now, another possibility here is that somebody has reached out to you from your past and you feel inclined to meet with them, reconnect with them, maybe dive into an activity with them that you used to do a lot and haven't as much. But now that they're reaching out and you're going to spend time with them, you're going to go back to this old activity. That's the Four of Cups in reverse, because upright, the Four of Cups might mean stepping back from these things, taking something that you used to enjoy and moving away from it and starting to look towards new things. So in the reverse, I think that you might be feeling like you want to head straight into this thing or accept this offer to return to the past in some way. And it's going to be comforting, which is probably why you feel tempted to go in that direction. But just because it's comforting doesn't mean it's a good idea. So the cards aren't saying it's a bad idea per se, but I think it might be something that you're just automatically doing without really thinking it through. And that's never a great idea. Whether or not it's a good idea to follow this path towards your past or towards nostalgia or towards an old friend, you want to make sure you're choosing it with intention, not just defaulting to it because you know them well, and so of course you should say yes. Or you used to like this thing, and so of course you should try it again. Maybe it is time to move on, maybe it's not, but the cards want you to think that through rather than just going immediately with whatever seems polite or easiest or most fun or comfortable. Now we need to talk about the Emperor over here. The Emperor has laws and rules, and so I think maybe you have a reason not to follow this path. It could go against some new habit or rule that you have in your life. Maybe there's something you gave up because you've decided that it goes against how you want to live your life now. And a temptation has arisen to dive back into that thing. Again, it could be through an old friend who wants to reconnect or invites you to do something. It could just be that you come across the objects associated with this activity or with information. There's news about it, and it makes you wonder, hey, that used to be a lot of fun. Maybe I should do that again. But I think that you have some rule or reason why you stopped talking to this friend or stopped being as close to them, or why you stopped this activity or moved away from it. And so when you're being pulled back in, I think that that probably clashes with something about your current life. It's not just in general, there might be a reason not to do it. There is a specific rule by which you live your life now that this goes against. Now, just because you have that rule doesn't mean that you should never break it. Maybe this is a good reason to break that rule. Maybe the rule itself should get thrown out, and this is a good way to realize that it's not a good rule. Maybe the rule is bad overall. Maybe instead it's just not phrased quite right. And so if you adjusted the rule a little bit and kept the good parts of it, maybe it would allow for you to enjoy this blast from the past without actually caving on your principles. But that might require adjusting your principles a little bit. It might also require completely throwing out this principle or this rule that would prevent you from going back to this. But I think what the cards are telling you are to make sure that what you're doing is consistent with your overall principles. So don't just make an exception for this thing. If you are ready to dive back into it, then make sure that you have an overall view of your life and your principles and values that is consistent with that. This should not just be an exception. If it would be an exception to the rules that you have, then you need to change the rules. Don't just make an exception. There's a big difference there. And if you just go in the moment without thinking through the larger implications of what you're doing, then it might be easy to miss that level of nuance. So think through the reasons for why you might avoid returning to this thing and decide in general, as a matter of principle, is it a good idea or not? And I think what the cards are saying is that you are either going to have to adjust your principles to account for this thing, or maybe you should not dive back into this thing. Maybe it's tempting or would be easy or enticing, but actually you have these rules in place for a reason, and it would be best to turn this down. I think the cards are saying that you have a strong temptation to follow it through, and it might be fine to follow it through. But I think the one path that you should not follow is say, I'll keep my current rules in place, even though they would not allow this, I'll just make an exception this time. I think the cards don't want you to do that. They're not telling you whether or not it's a good idea to go back to this thing, but they are telling you it does clash with a current habit or rule that you have in your life. They could be self-enforced if you are the emperor. It also could be enforced by somebody else. This could be an external rule, and it's not really up to you whether or not to change it, but it also might be up to you how strictly to follow this rule or not. And then therefore that becomes kind of like a self-imposed rule, because the real rule that you're following is how strict do I follow this external rule or not. So in a way it becomes your own rule to alter as will if you decide to either follow it very strictly or with a little bit of leeway. But either way, you want to not just treat this decision as an isolated decision. Think about how it fits into your overall habit of being, and then decide, do I need to shift the way that I think about the world or the way that I act in order to accommodate for this thing, or is the way that I interact with the world not consistent with this thing, and then therefore I like these rules, and so even if I like this thing, I need to turn it down. Now, turning it down might not be completely saying no. If it's a friend reaching out, that doesn't mean telling them, no, never talk to me again. It might mean dipping your toe in the water, but understanding that you have moved past this, and so not really diving back in head first. If you understand at a deep level that this is not something you really want to take up a significant part of your life, then it could be safe to just do it a little bit, maybe for the sake of the friend who wants to experience this with you, maybe just for the sake of nostalgia, but don't confuse a little bit of enjoying the past or a temptation with fully accepting it into your life and letting it become a major part of it again. If you really know what it is that you want, it can be safe to take on just a little bit of it and know that it's not going to become a major thing. But if you're not really set on where your boundaries are and what your rules are, then you might start with it as just a little bit and say, oh, I'll just relive the past a little, have some fun. But then it's a lot of fun, and so you do more and more, and suddenly it's become a major part of your life again, even if you didn't really want that to happen. So what the cards are telling you is that when something comes up that is a temptation, often to relive something from the past, or a friend who is a good friend who invites you to do something that you're not sure about, make sure that you think about how accepting or denying this offer or this temptation is going to fit into your overall life, and then make that decision with intention. Do not just dive in because it would be fun or because it would be easy, but also don't avoid it for that reason either. The cards aren't telling you to avoid this thing. They're just telling you to think through how it fits into your life, and then with intention, take on just as much of it as you would like or as befits the situation, no more and no less. I think without thinking it through with intention, you're more likely to either reject it entirely or dive in head first. And while it's possible that one of those extremes is the right path, a middle path is more likely to be the right path. And no matter what the right path is, thinking it through carefully, being your own emperor, deciding where are your boundaries and then respecting those and adjusting them if necessary. Don't just stick to rules that you've made just because they're rules that you've made, in the same way that you don't want to do what a friend asks just because they're a friend of yours. So I see a tension here between external influences and internal influences. And it's never the case that one is right and one is wrong, but make sure you're considering both fairly and equally before making your final decision. So if you enjoyed this reading, then subscribe to see more. And if you'd like to learn about tarot cards or try some of my online guided readings, then head on over to foolskey.com where you can check that out. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.